This is how the program looks when it starts off. The main screen is divided into 4 parts. The center of the screen shows the rendered object. You can click and drag to rotate this object. The panel to the right can be divided into 2 parts: manipulation of the active object at top, or its connections at the bottom. The panel below allows submission of completed objects as well as undo-redo functionality. When the program starts up, we will see a single gray cube of modest size. This is our root object. Each object has 4 properties which can be changed: color, shape, scale, and rotation. To change an object, we must first click to select that object. The object now glows, and all available functions become visible. We can select the type of the object by selecting the appropriate button at the top of the screen. For example, if we wish to change our cube to a cylinder, we can select this button, or a cylinder into a sphere by selecting this button. We can choose the color of our object simply by selecting the color on the palette: yellow, red, blue, or any of the other colors that we desire. Scale can be changed separately on all 3 dimensions, x, y, and z. If we double the scale in the x dimension, we can see that the object gets wider. We can also shrink the object in the x direction, or return it to normal. If we change the object's scale in the y direction, we can see that the height shrinks, or if we expand it, the height increases. Z-scale increases the object toward or away from us, so we can't see it in this direction. We notice that nothing happens when we change the rotation in any of the planes. This is because the object that we are currently working with is the root object. Since we can rotate the entire screen, there is no need to be able to rotate the root object individually. This is unique to the root object. All other objects will rotate as expected. This will be shown later. To rotate the world, simply click and drag in the rendering area. If you drag from left to right, the object will rotate in one plane. If you click and drag from bottom to top, the object will rotate in the other plane. Undo and redo act as expected. A full history of actions is kept, so we can undo all the way to our initial state. A single object, however, cannot be used to represent anything besides the most simple of objects. To create something more complex, we need to add multiple objects. Objects can be added by attaching them to existing objects. Select the appropriate Add Child button to add a new connected object to the active object. Each object, whether it's a cube or not, has an imaginary cube surrounding it. That imaginary cube defines the possible attachment points to and from that object. Objects can be attached by specifying an attachment point on both objects. The default is the middle of both objects. We can now choose that the attachment point for the child, in this case the white cube, is the lower right face. First we will rotate the object so we can see that face, and we will select the attachment point down on the child indicator. We can immediately see in the rendering that the face on the white cube that we specified is now attached to the center of the root, or gray cube. The slight discoloration at the edge of the connection is an artifact of the rendering and can be ignored. We will now select the parent attachment point to be the far face by selecting on the corresponding parent attachment point selector. At this point, we can see that the 2 cubes are connected at opposite faces. Attachments can also be specified that are edges or corners instead of faces. Here we attach the objects together by connecting opposing corners. We can see now that the corners of the 2 objects are attached to each other. Now that we have 2 objects, we can demonstrate rotation. We can rotate on either the x, y, or z plane independently. The cube is then rotated in respect to the piece that it is attached to. This means that if the current piece has pieces attached to it, they will all be moved together as one piece. Rotation in the x direction, rotation in the y direction, and rotation in the z direction each produce different angles of rotation. We can also create copies of pieces that we have already made. There are two types of copies, bound and unbound. In a bound copy, a change in the first copy will affect the second copy. In an unbound copy, the two copies are free to change independently. Copies will initially share the same connection, and will therefore overlap each other and be invisible. Here we select the unbroken chain to create a bound copy. We modify its attachment point so we can see both copies. Notice that both copies are glowing selected. If we change the color to red, both copies are now red. We can change the type of the object to a sphere, and again, both copies are spheres. Only the attachment points can now differ between the two copies. We will undo to get rid of this copy. Now we will create an unbound copy by selecting the broken chain. Again, it's invisible because they share the same position, but we will shift one of them over. We notice this time only one of the cubes is highlighted, and if we change the color of that cube, or if we change it into a sphere, only that one is affected. The other remains as it was. As you have probably noticed, the indicator points rotate as we rotate the shape. This means that the relative location of the two will remain constant, even when we rotate the environment. Now I will show how one might go about making a complete object using this editor. I'm going to return to the initial condition, and we'll try to show you how to make a horse. So a horse has a cylinder body, so I choose a cylinder first. I wanted to extend it so that it had a longer body. Sometimes you have to play around a little bit to get what you want. Here I'm adding legs. Legs go parallel to the body. Again, I just try the different things and you can see it update in real time. So here you'll notice that I've attached it to one corner, but I've attached it as the child. In just a moment I'll realize that I should probably use the apparent attachment point so that I can do that more gracefully with the rest of the legs. So here I've realized that. I've switched it back over. Again, you can see everything update in real time, so you can just play with things, see what looks right. Now I'm going to create a chained copy because all of the legs are going to be the same, just in different places. And I'm going to attach 4 of them onto each of the different sides. So now the horse has legs, and it's onto the neck. So the neck is also going to be a cylinder. Here I added it to the child, which was the leg. It added it to all of them. Oops, had to undo that. Okay, so we've added it to the body. We're going to rotate it so that it's at 45 degrees so the neck sticks up away from the body. Here I'm going to attach it to the front, but now it's this big cylinder. I want to make it a bit thinner, like a horse's neck actually is. And here we go. I wanted to make it a little bit taller, but I realized that this was way too tall, so I undid that and instead shifted it up higher on the horse's body. Next I wanted to add a head. I was thinking about adding a cylinder for a head, but I think that the cone added a little bit more of the muzzle-ish sort of shape. Not perfect, but again, it's just supposed to try and represent it. I actually had a bit of trouble finding where I wanted to attach the cone, so you'll see a little bit of messing around here. But the first thing was to get its width the same as the neck, so you didn't want to have the head overshadowing it like that. So I rotated it so that it would be pointing straight ahead, and then I wanted it up a little bit. Ended up doing a little bit of button pushing just to try to get it into the right place. Sometimes you also need to rotate the entire object so that you can see the different attachment points, because they can cover each other up, so sometimes it's just a good idea to rotate it if you're having trouble figuring out where to attach it. Eventually I find a good rotation so that I can choose the attachment point that I was hoping for. There we go. Now all that's left is we're going to modify its color. Looks like there's just a little bit of re-maneuvering there, but There we go. Okay, so now we're going to make our horse brown. We move all the pieces brown, and again with the legs, because they're all attached, I only have to do one, and they all follow suit. There we go. That's our horse. Not very good, but good enough.